You're listening to episode 95 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted growth strategies. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. In every episode, I bring you inspiring people, stories, ideas, and lessons from around the globe to help you and your business to flourish. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Now today I'm having a wholehearted conversation with the lovely Rachel Jansen about becoming a visible woman. Now Rachel's navigated many of her own next chapters, from a really successful career as a journalist and chief of staff and columnist in a leading media organization, before a career hiatus when she had her kids, a return, and then a redirection. Now Rachel's incredibly passionate about this concept of us being visible, and you'll hear that passion come through in the conversation that she has with me today. Now, Rachel really believes that when you see your wisdom, that it can actually help someone else, that will give you that, what I call future fuel to keep moving. Because ultimately it's our fear that holds us back from contributing. And she has a burning desire and some pretty great tools and services to help change that. Now, she knows that your experience is your expertise and believes that you can be your own role model first and then go forward and inspire others and assist them as well with that experience and those skills that you have. Now, absolutely, we both believe that your challenges can transform into lessons that you can share with others in their next chapters as well. Rachel's got some fantastic ideas about what needs to change in the world as well as our worlds to allow us to be more visible and to really take advantage of and leverage that incredible insight that you have as an individual. I'm sure that this conversation is going to put a fire in your belly and make you recognize that you too can go out there into the world, be highly visible, and make a difference in your next chapter. I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Today I am rather ridiculously excited because I'm getting to introduce you to a kindred spirit. Now Rachel Jansen and I go way back. We've known each other for several years, but when I say we're kindred spirits, we both have this passionate belief in the power of women in their 40s and beyond, that we are coming into the years where rather than become invisible, rather than step back and sort of reflect happily on the life we've had to date, we're actually revving up for the next chapter of our lives. And Rachel just articulates this burning energy that we have and channels it in such impressive ways. I reckon you're going to enjoy this conversation just as much as I will. So thank you so much, Rachel, for spending your time with us today.
Oh, thanks so much, Ange. It's such an honour for me to be here because you've had some exceptional guests on the podcast. So it's a real honour for me. Thank you.
And, and you're most welcome. But everyone I speak to on this podcast makes a contribution to the conversation. So, yeah, there's been some people that I'm in awe of in terms of, the books they've written and the things they've done. But I think you and I share this perspective that every single one of us has this contribution to make. It may be a different flavour, a different size, a different angle. But us women, us visible women in our next chapters have got a lot to say, wouldn't you think?
Look, we do, and there's this fear that holds women back from contributing, and it's something that I've written about and you've probably seen, but I have this burning desire to see women step up and share their thoughts and their experience, because at the moment, the way that our society is, we're only hearing one half of a conversation. And our society constructs, the narratives that we hear in society are very masculine driven, not because men have purposely tried to take over the conversation. It's just the way our society has evolved, and with women not in leadership positions and not in, all of that sort of stuff. The way things have been done have been masculine driven, and the conversations have been from male leaders. But we have this extraordinary amount of wisdom and experience to share, and we don't fully realise how much we have to offer. And what I see is women are often told that they're wrong because they do it differently to what has gone before us. But different is not wrong. It's just that people don't have not seen the different before. So that's why we see, women criticised for being too emotional or not strong enough in leadership. But look at Jacinda Ardern. She's out there being a really strong, compassionate leader. That is what women have to offer. It's different. It doesn't mean it's wrong, and there's a place for it. So my passion is to see women rise in all different areas of their life. But in terms of having a business, it takes courage to put yourself out there, be yourself, and to share your thoughts and opinions. But it's so critical that women do this so that we have a greater balanced conversation globally about issues that matter, environment and gender equality and how we raise children, and even just economics, because women have a different approach. So it's not wrong. It is different, but we can't balance these narratives unless others are having some input into the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, bringing up Jacinda as a great example at the moment, given the tragedy that happened in my home, Christchurch isn't my home, but New Zealand being my home from so many years ago, and breaking that paradigm of what power can look like, breaking that paradigm. Just resolute and compassionate and focused and so many other, there's so many words that come to mind. We'd like to clone her and bring her to Australia and probably scatter her around the world without a doubt. She can make a lot of difference in a lot of places. But this feeling that you have, or this very strong belief, this passion for helping women's voices rise. I mean, there was a client of mine a wee while ago who said, imagine if we could harness all the collective wisdom and experience of women in this next chapter, in our older years, in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, and actually pulled all that together and released it into the world. It would be a tsunami of force to be reckoned with. But what stops us from doing that? Because there's the question. I know I've had a lot of conversations with women over the years, and some have moved through this doubt and claimed their space, but others sometimes feel they don't have something to contribute. What do you see as the difference there? How do we encourage women to actually recognise the strengths and the experience and the wisdom that they do have?
Yeah, that's a big question. So let's start with a couple of things. So, I call them, in terms of online media and content and messaging, I call them an invisibility cloak, that it works for Harry Potter, but it doesn't do much for us when we're hidden in this invisibility cloak. And that it's all fear-driven. Like, for me, all negativity is fear-driven. All negative behaviours and emotions are fear-driven. But in this instance, there's a couple of reasons for the fear. A lot of women have not necessarily been in a position where they've been able to share their thoughts and their ideas in terms of a leadership. And when I say leadership, I don't mean you're the CEO and you're the top of the... It's just even just being a solopreneur and just... That's leadership, like just doing your own thing. Even if you're making it doesn't matter. That's leadership. So this fear of actually saying, this is me, these are my ideas, this is what I believe in. If you've not been in a work environment where that is welcome, it's not something you're used to, and you may have had experiences whereby you were put in your place. Then there's that whole concept of being different and who am I? Like you talk about the imposter syndrome, and we can all relate to that. So then again, there is that who am I? And I'll tell you something that really has worked for me, something that I've learned only recently, and it's from having younger friends. So I have some very close friends who are in their 20s and early 30s. And I take for granted my wisdom. And this is the first time that I realised how much, really truly realised deep in my gut, how much I had to offer. Because when I talk about things that I see are just everyday things, like my life experience, the road that I have travelled, they have not yet started on that journey. So when I share stories like that, their eyes go wide and they just think that I am a guru. And I say to them, no, it's just that I've got 20 years more experience than you. I've lived it, gender equality, motherhood, trying to keep all the pieces of the puzzle, but even just experience in terms of the way I'm spoken to and the way, I'm treated in society, all of that sort of stuff. So hanging out with women who are younger than you, you start to realise how much you have to offer and how wise you are, simply because you carry the scars, you've got the scuffed knees, you've got up and you've lived through it, and and the things that you have lived through, they've not yet experienced. So just sharing that, they saw it as a gift to them, the experience I shared with them, but it has been such a gift
for you,
because I come from a journalism background where women had to work twice as hard to be heard in the newsroom on a daily basis. It's a really male-dominated industry, and you were constantly sort of treated as if you weren't quite as switched on as the blokes. Not by everyone, but largely. So to have these young women go, oh, wow, and for me to realise that they actually didn't know, it was a real gift. So in terms of women, going back to your original question, when you start to see as a woman that what you're sharing, your wisdom, actually helps someone, it gives you the courage to continue to share those thoughts. So remove yourself, consider that you've potentially been in an environment previously where your thoughts and ideas weren't necessarily respected or welcomed or even sought out, but that there are other communities where it will be soaked up like rain after a drought. And I think that really helps you move forward and see that you can contribute on such a huge scale, or even on a small scale, it doesn't matter.
It's a choice there, isn't it? And that's really important, I think, that distinction there. If we're in the entrepreneurial world, we're often encouraged to think really, really big. And we've got these, people who are crushing it in business and are just doing these enormous things. And the gap between where we are and where they are seems so vast, but that's the example that is so often put in front of us, which is why on my podcast in particular, I love speaking to the normal people, like us, who are making an impact in our corner of the world rather than the world. And that's just as valid. I think that's really important recognition to have. But you made me think of a couple of things when you were giving that example, or your experience there of how when you were with the younger women, you actually got that contrast and you recognized the depth of your wisdom. So that's almost, again, in an entrepreneurial way, we're often told or suggested that our gifts, the things that come so easily to us, we take for granted. And so we don't necessarily value them in terms of channeling them into a business. It feels to me like exactly the same scenario here. So our overall gifts, the gifts of wisdom and experience, not specifically skills, but the gifts of wisdom and experience, we overlook because you can't see the forest for the trees. We're in it. We don't appreciate that depth that we have when we're hanging out with our fellow next chapter women. So perhaps that's a great example of what we need to do, is to go and mix a little with the youngers, and then we'll recognize that depth that's there. That's a really, really interesting point.
It's been a real eye-opener for me. Their energy and enthusiasm for life is just tremendous. When I first met them, I thought, they're not going to want to hang out with an old chick like me. But isn't that true? We put ourselves in this box. Like, that was me doing that, no one else. So it's been a real learning experience for me, and I love them dearly. They're like, they're like sisters kind of thing. But, it's been a real gift. And you're right. We all assume that our knowledge, it's like my knowledge as a journalist, I've taken for granted, my skills, because that's just what I do. And when I started mixing and realised how difficult writing is for most people, I went, oh, okay. Like, it's different. Like, I can't draw to save my life.
But you create with words. And that's where we need to recognise that. But own it. It's that quote, accept yourself, but revel in it, in who you are and what you're good at. And when you can and often it's what you love doing as opposed to what you've potentially done all along. But I've said it before, and your experience is your expertise, and it counts for so much. And it's simply that we haven't had a huge number of role models go before us yet as women of this age group, that they're out there if you go and find them, but just be your own role model. Like, this is your life, and it would be a terrible tragedy for me if I got to the end of it and hadn't done these things that continually go through my head. Running around in your head, absolutely. Yeah. That point about role models is something that's come up time and time again. If I think about, I see us as trailblazers, okay? Now, there's incredible women in the past who have trailblazed in many ways, because immediately what comes to mind is the suffragettes who got the vote and so many other things. But again, I don't want us to downplay what it is that we are doing. My role models in terms of the women that were around me when I was growing up at this age, I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago. My mum certainly wasn't thinking about, gathering her life experience and channeling it into a new enterprise that would create a sustainable business for the next 20 years.
But she probably didn't have the opportunity.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like, the options that were available to us and have changed even in the last 30 years are exceptional. The entrepreneurs, and that expression wasn't even used, the women in business around me were not able to start their own enterprise in the same way. I mean, the opportunities that are available to us today are phenomenal. I started my business in 2003 with a laptop and a business card. That was it. That was the capital expenditure.
And you don't even need the business card anymore. You just need the laptop, so... Yeah, absolutely. My mum still works full time, so she's been a fantastic role model to me my whole life. But she's worked hard, and she's worked full time my entire life. But I don't want to work in that same way. I don't want that same life where you have to, you can't manage. And now the opportunities. Oh my goodness! I look at my daughter; she's 14, and you'd be looking at your daughter too, Ange, going, "Wow, there's almost too many options." In terms of what you can do, but we are so lucky. But you are right. We are trailblazing in a completely different way, and we have tools to spread a message and be a role model across such a huge platform, such a huge audience. So you don't have to be a suffragette. You don't have to get yourself arrested. You don't even have to be a big name. But we have these computers and this internet thing. And even if it's just one person's life you make better through what you do, that's huge.
And that's the ripple effect that kicks in after that. I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago now that talked about you have invisible impact. So you just never know. I mean, we do have measurement. I can tell how many people are downloading the podcast episodes. I can see how many people have visited a page on my website, but you can't see the ripple effect. So your services, your advice, your input, etc., with a client or an audience can then ripple on to the next person. You change the way they see themselves or what it is that they're going to do, and that impacts their daughters, their friends, their colleagues, etc. So that invisible impact is hugely exciting, and you just got to trust it's happening. But the key, as you said, is, as you do say often, is to get the visibility happening. Like, that's the first step. It's actually having the confidence, having the appreciation of the potential that you've got to actually put yourself out there. So we talked about, there's some fear there that perhaps you hadn't had possibly your opinion or your viewpoints taken seriously before, but now you can with the modern day tools that we have. But there's a big jump here. You mentioned yourself when I was reading through the background, you had an incredibly successful career. In your first life, so to speak, in your previous chapters. But then there was a bit of a clunk in the middle when you came to terms with...
It wasn't even a clunk. It was a car wreck. It's just been, an ongoing... it wasn't even a clunk. So we hit a major wall. So yes, I had this hugely successful career. I decided at 14 I wanted to be a journalist. It was all I ever wanted in my life. I didn't want marriage. I didn't want kids. They weren't life goals for me, but a career as a journalist was, and I loved it, even the difficulties. I just loved it. And then, of course, I had children, and not only did the wheels fall off, but, the car crashed. So it was, I stayed at home with the kids. That was my choice. I would make the same choice again, but I didn't realise at the time the full impact that choice was going to have, like the full implications, because nobody talked about, again, we're trailblazing through this. Nobody sort of talked about it. I didn't have role. My mum worked, so I didn't really realise what was going to happen. And what happened was that my career sort of was put on hold. I did some work from home, but I wanted to be there for the kids. But when my son started school, it was like, well, what am I going to do? Because I still need to be able to pick up I was still the one responsible for the children, for the house. And again, that wasn't a conversation that I even had with my husband, because he's a great hands-on dad, but we didn't even have this conversation. Well, why is it me that's got to be home? Why can't you take a career break or something? And if I had my time again, I would absolutely have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it killed my career. And in all honesty, it nearly pushed me over the edge, because this perfect storm of having given up the one thing that was so important to me and ending up with the husband and kids that I never dreamt of. I love them dearly. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to get rid of them. I'm so glad I have them. But I would have I always had my meltdowns in the laundry. Every time. And I just had this massive meltdown, and it was only last year. And I said, because I'm sick of washing everyone's clothes and cooking their meals, and I didn't want to be just mum anymore. And I've had these little businesses on the side and all the rest of it. But it was a really frustrating, it was a really down time when I realised I was not going to ever have again that one thing that I always wanted to, and that so much of my self-worth was tied up in that label and in that career and in that work, that it felt legitimate, and everything else I didn't feel as legitimate. As a journalist, you're taught and trained to seek advice from legitimate sources, from authority figures, and I certainly do not feel like an authority figure. I've realised now that I am, but it was this process. So I had a big meltdown in the laundry, and I could see the fear on my husband's face. He wasn't sure if he should move, that he might startle me further in terms of what am I meant to do here. But fortunately, he's exceptionally supportive. And I've had lots and lots of I've set some things for myself since then and really pushed forward. It was just, this is enough. I'm done now. That's the past. Move forward. But it was this real process of a woman of my age with all the hormones that start to play up, and I've still got kids, and I see so many women also get to that point where they don't want to just be in this box anymore, and they've really gone without so many things that fulfill them, and I don't believe that you can live a happy life if you've given up everything that fulfills you. And for me, that was career kind of stuff, some sort of service, right? And I see it all the time, and I do believe that that's why a lot of marriages break down at this age group, because women just they crave something for themselves.
I totally agree. It's a thing that I feel incredibly passionate about. I believe without any doubt at all, if we can go into the next chapter of our life wrapped around something that we're really passionate about, that has this real connection for us, something that we feel will make a difference, that matters, that's important, we will age better. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, the whole kit and caboodle. If we don't have that, if we sort of fade away, so to speak, I think that kills your soul, it kills your spirit. So that feeling, it's that real transition, and this is not true of every woman. So I don't want to turn this into our conversation into a stereotype, but it is how women like you and I feel, and lots of other ones do as well. My kids, Cameron's gone off to uni. My daughter's 16. I have stepsons. I've been in some sort of parenting role for 27 years. Enough's enough. I mean, sorry, Charlotte, I'm still going to hang around for a bit longer. It's okay. Yeah. But it's like, it's that rising. I've always had something sitting on the side, because like you, I wasn't a journalist, but I worked in media for quite a while until I got pregnant, had the first baby. Going back, it just wasn't easy. It just wasn't. I mean, 20 years ago, today it's still not easy. So I did what so many women do, is I took the skills that I had and I created a business out of it. But I ended up running, I built my marketing agency, and then in 2012, I realized, you've heard the expression, be careful you don't climb the ladder and then find that it's leaning against the wrong wall. Well, I built the frickin' wall as well as climbed the ladder, and I built the wrong thing, because I recognize that just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. And so letting go of the skills that you necessarily had in your career and actually leaning into a variation of that where you feel quite passionate and compelled and, really strong in your opinions about this other thing, that's the leap that I wanted to make into. And it's important. That is as important as taking care of my family, of being that emotional barometer, of, taking care of the house, taking care, like we do. It is the role that, again, stereotypical, but it is the role that women tend to play. It's the way we were socialized.
Yes, and that's that narrative.
There. Yes,
that's that narrative. So when we go back to what we were talking about before about, contributing to global conversations, so the narrative and the constructs of our society says that women are the carers and men are the helpers, right? Now, my husband takes very good care of our children. I don't believe gender equality will happen until men are seen as equal carers and not helpers. And when that happens, women will have more time and ability to do the things that fulfill them. And it's not necessarily a career or business. Sometimes it's just having the time to do some creative outlet or some other sense of service, right? That sense of service. And I talked on my podcast about the difference between sacrifice and service. Women sacrifice everything rather than viewing what the care that they give as being of service to their family, but still retaining something of themselves. Now, because there's a definition of happiness that is that it comes from being fulfilled. Now, for some women, being a mum and a carer, that is all the fulfillment they need, and that's totally fine. But for me, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
And I recognise that pretty early on. But then you feel guilty. But then you find that as soon as you become a mother, that is how you are labelled. And I think what happened, so you instantly become a mother. Everything is targeted to you as a mother, and that's who you are, right? You cease to be that individual that you were before. So, and I think when we talk about that fear of this next chapter business and these entrepreneurs putting themselves out there and sharing their ideas, is that they feel that they've been pigeonholed or quietened, or not quite sure where they fit in this. They don't want to stay here. They want to do this, but they're not quite sure
what this is.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because the narrative in our society says that women are the carers and they are the mothers, and that is what fulfills them as an individual, right? Giving birth and having children is the greatest thing that can ever happen to you. And I can assure you that it's not the greatest thing that happens to a lot of women. They actually struggle with it, and that's okay. But that's not what we're told. So when you start to step away from family, you can feel that you're somehow doing the wrong thing, and just admitting that, look, this construct, this way we work doesn't work for me. It doesn't make me happy. Yes, I love you. And it's a really hard conversation to have with your husband. I'd suggest do it in the laundry as you have a breakdown. It works much better. But saying, I just can't keep doing this. It's killing me bit by bit on the inside. I need me back. I need some of me back, and to include all of the pieces, but I can't do without that piece anymore.
Because I think what you're talking about here is that recognition, that self-awareness, which is so important. So we can become aware of this bubbling up, and we may push it down, but it keeps coming back. So we have to acknowledge it and work out how to incorporate it into the person we're becoming. Yeah, because we're not the person we were. We are becoming at this sort of age into this new version of ourselves, I believe. And if we have to deal with this great big chunk of guilt that is also put on us because of the narrative that we've been living, then you've got a double, a hydra, that beast with two heads who's coming at you from both sides. Yeah. So there's a lot of things.
And if you step into that part of your life that keeps calling you, that you can't ignore, and that for me, it became this ache, right? This and a bit of rage. That could have been the hormones. But but if we all do that, if we all step forward in any way that suits us or that is us, then the narrative changes.
Yes.
And that's where we change that global conversation, where women step forward and say, what, and we are then no longer expected, not because people want to keep women in their place. I'm sure there is some of that, but it's just this is the way it's always been, and people don't know any different. So this is that change that you and I were just saying, that we are this force of change. When you step into these things that are important to you as an individual, I'm not trying to make six figures. I don't care about that. That's not my motivation, and it might not be for some of your listeners. I just want to do work that makes me happy and is of service to someone else. Important, significant work on any sort of level, if we step into that and we show what we can do and what we know, the narrative changes in just naturally, organically.
I think that's very aligned with the overall, message that I'm talking about is us consciously creating our next chapters, which is a new story, which is a new narrative. So you've got your own story going on that you're stepping into, but it is contributing. It is a chapter in the larger story, which is what we all want to be telling. And I think what I'm hearing, again, aligns very much with the perspective that I have, is that especially at this age, you talk about significance as being important and fulfillment. And to me, it's the combination of fulfillment and contribution, because we want to contribute.
Yes.
Yeah, so if we're not contributing, then we feel like we've lost some purpose. So contribution is vital. But on the other hand, we need fulfillment, so the personal side of things. Because if we're always just giving and it's not related to fulfillment, then we feel resentful. So it's that beautiful blend that we are rediscovering of how can we contribute and how will that fulfill us. And then sitting, underneath that does come financial rewards if you choose to express that experience through the lens of business. And I'm not apologizing for enjoying making a living from what it is that I do. Absolutely. I adore the fact that I can sit here in my office at home and I can create an income that supports my family, myself, and the things that I want to do. But if it wasn't making a contribution and if it wasn't fulfilling me, I wouldn't be doing it. So we've got to have that combination. Yeah. So you recognise you went through the perfect storm. We had the breakdown in the laundry. I think there is something about laundries.
I'm so tired of washing everyone's clothes. I can really go. And my husband no longer asks how to work different appliances. He asks, the children, because I said to them, can you please just all stop think before you ask me a question, because they'd ask, is there any such and such in the freezer? Well, did you go to the freezer and look in it and have a look? Like my brain just doesn't want to go there anymore. So
I got better things to put that brain in motion for.
Yeah, like pick themselves, guys. Like seriously, I've got 236 tabs open already. I don't need any. Thanks very much. But I've had a few breakdowns in the laundry.
So when you went through here and you came out the other side and you recognized that really and this is, I think, is the soapbox moment. Okay. When you find the thing that if I gave you a soapbox and you were standing in the middle of Times Square or wherever, our speaker's corner, and you got on that soapbox and started talking about your thing, then that thing that gets you so excited, so passionate, so anchored in lots of ways as well, there's where we've got to start getting curious. Because this is the thing that I'm so interested in. And so perhaps if you are, and this podcast is very much to do with expressing it through the lens of business, how did you go from this is what I feel so strongly about to I'm going to turn this into a means of business? How did you make that transition and leap? There's a story here too.
Where is this going again? How many people? Anyway. It's okay. I'm always an open book. And it's funny that you use the soapbox analogy, because when I work with my business client, like the clients I help with their messaging, I talk about a soapbox rant to help them work out where their point of difference may lie, because that's where the fire comes from. So
yes.
Look, this has not been, it wasn't just one breakdown and the air cleared and the heavens opened and all the rest of it. It wasn't as easy and quick as that. I hate to lead people astray. You and I worked together several years ago, and you knew then that I was really struggling with trying to nut down what I wanted to do then. So I was still conflicted. I wanted to feel legitimate as a journalist, because I'm also a qualified health coach, and part of my great passion is to help women feel less overwhelmed and to look after themselves and to balance. And when you were talking a minute ago about fulfillment and service and stuff, I have what I call these 10 elements of balance. And well, it's actually, I actually call it to have a complete life. And if you take a piece of the pie out, then it's not complete. So it's a different way of looking at balance. But having a purpose, some sort of sense of purpose outside of just caring for people and doing chores it's an essential part of a happy life. Like, you can't be happy without it. So for me, I needed to feel a sense of purpose. And to be the woman who lost the one thing that she ever wanted in her life, that career as a journalist, to have sacrificed that for the benefit of my children, and simultaneously having watched my husband's career take off, and he was the one that never wanted a career. That was really, really difficult. I'm feeling upset just thinking about it. It was really hard. And I was also in my mid-40s, and I said to my husband, I cannot see this future in front of me. I'm just going to get fat, grey, wrinkly, saggy, old, and I have no job prospect. Like, my career is done. What's left, right? And then you sort of get over yourself, or I did. And I sort of said, F it. And I'm not someone who's going to wallow in it for too long. I did for a bit.
I think it's okay. And this is important for our listeners to hear as well, it's okay to feel sad and bad and mad.
I agree.
We just don't want to stay there.
I was at my doctor, who's a friend, having my hormones tested, because the light bulb sort of went on. I went, maybe some of my craziness isn't actually just me, and it turns out it wasn't. But, is this rush, well, you're depressed, you need to... I'm like, no, I'm sad and I'm a bit lonely. I'm an extrovert and I work from home, and that's not healthy for me. So it was recognising that, no, I'm sad. I'm grieving the loss of my career, and it will pass, and it did. Yeah. And I need contact with human beings. It's not good for me to work from home all the time, and that was really having a negative effect on my mental health. So now I've made a huge effort, and it's a completely different mindset. And I realised that the message is always in the mess, and I always believe that when you go through something, it becomes of benefit to someone else later. It becomes a story, it becomes a lesson that you can share with other people. And the more you share that, the more people realise that it's not just them. Everyone thinks it's just them, and it never is. It never is. So I've always, for the 5 years, had this deep passion to help women be more than just a mother. And part of it was health and well-being, and part of it was seeing them rise in business, because that flexibility and having that thing for themselves is really important. And I was always facilitating, should I do that? Should I do this? And in the end, I went, stuff it. I'm going to just do it all. And so that's too bad. I've wasted too much time trying to decide. So I'm just going to do it all. So I put up Visible Women Media so that I can help women in business. I still have my site, and this year I will launch some balance type coaching and programs, because it's just important. I want women to realise that they have a choice, that they can still choose the things in their life and have a life. They don't have to give up everything, and you can put some pieces back together. And I want to see women rise in life and in leadership and business or work, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be super duper high level, but just I want to change the gender equality situation. I want women to rise, and I want women to be visible in life and business, because in their 40s and so on, you feel like you disappear in terms of aging. I want women to embrace who they are for what they are at this age, and really be in touch with their innate wisdom and their learned wisdom, and to freaking share it, because our daughters need to see it, they need to hear it, and so do our sons.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Really important that the message is heard, not just amongst ourselves, but amongst the men, because there's a lot of good men out there who still do think that we're quite goddessy, and so it really, I'd had enough of me. I'd had enough of feeling miserable. I'd had enough of, it was like an eruption. In that book, Women Who Run with Wolves. Clarissa talks in that about women who have led this, what she calls a dry life, where they've let go of that wild, innate themness, that feminine part of them that's quite wild and
untamed.
And I think it's your essence, your personal essence. It's that confidence you had as a kid and a teenager, and when you just thought you could she didn't think about much actually, but that eventually it erupts. And I see women, and for some women I think it ends in divorce, and for others it ends in different ways. But for me it was like, I'm just so done with feeling judged or worrying about being judged for what I do. I am just going to do it. And so that's what I did.
I think that there it is. There, like what you just said there, the essence of the messaging there is that we do get to this stage. I think all of us go through the storm, okay, and we can ride out the storm, and it can take us to a brand new world, or it can just plonk us back in Kansas. So, and the way in which we can ride this storm to a new possibility is by having these conversations, by having the example of other women who are saying, God damn it, it's our time. I am going to battle through this. I'm going to demand the space that I want to take up. And you don't have to do that in a strident way. You can do that in a quietly purposeful way. It's however it looks for you. But I think it is inevitable that we go through this transition. Be it physical, but it's more of a mental transition that I wasn't that, I am becoming this, and I am going to claim it. And when we start to get to this age, I've certainly crossed the threshold that I used to be such a people pleaser, so freaking concerned about what everyone would think and judge and do. And so much of my life before was based on how will that be judged? And I just refuse to do that any longer. I don't have the time or the desire now. And I do recognize, and I want other women to recognize the value of what they have got to contribute. So I think the point that you made about this is, you may not have used these words, but this is an evolution. So what happens today, in another 6 months, 12 months, we may look slightly different. And it's embracing that growth that continues as we're moving into these next chapters, which I find most exciting. I can't wait. I feel like there's so much still ahead.
And I think in my personal experience and women my own age, there's so much fear around being in your 40s and 50s and beyond, because we are a society that reveres youth.
Yeah.
Instagram is, it's all light, tight and bright. That's a saying from the newspaper days when the editor wanted something light, tight and bright in terms of the photos and stuff, had to be young and fun, and that's the society that we live in, because in terms of media, that appeals to others. So for me personally, and certainly from what I've seen, you get to this age, and in a society that reveres youth, you worry that I'm too old to do this. I don't look the way that I used to. I can't compete in this youth oriented. But there's this real fear of being old or older and being judged as being old, right? And this is a huge fear for women in this age group, I think, in terms of being visible, because putting yourself out there, whether it be on video, whether it be even written word, in a photo, like so many of them that will not have a photo taken. That's a huge obstacle, I think, that holds them back. They may believe that they've got something to contribute, but if they fear being judged for their age in this society, then it's very difficult to move forward. And again, the more of us that do it,
yes,
the more you can see that it's possible and it's okay. Like Deepak Chopra, actually, I was listening to a podcast with him the other day where he actually says self-image is what other people think of you, but yourself, you are not beneath anyone, and what your image is not you. Don't worry about it. Well, that you yourself, you are the essence, and you tap into that essence of who you are. How it appears as an image on the outside, it's really irrelevant, because it will all disappear eventually. It'll all go.
And that's the key. So what I'm hearing as we're bringing this conversation to a close is that if each one of us cultivates the courage to actually step out, to actually say, I've got something to say, I've got something to contribute. I loved your line before. We were talking about how our challenges become lessons. Now, I believe that next chapters are built on skinned knees, and our experience will shorten and sweeten the journey for others, but we have to have the courage to actually tell the stories, to say, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that I've overcome this or overcome that. It can just be, I've found a better way. I've found an easier way. Look, I've worked out how to make your website prettier, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be tied to emotion, but we have to recognize the value of that contribution. So that's what my message is all about, is all of us stepping forward and channeling what we have to give through the lens of business. And people like yourself who help people embrace the visibility part and actually recognize that they do have something to say and help them phrase and form that so that they can deliver it. I mean, you've got a vital role to play, because we're not, this age group, this army that's coming through is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more and more and more of us. And so we've got more and more stories to tell. So Rachel, where do people come to find you if they want to find out about becoming more visible, having more balance, both of those things? My apologies. I forgot that my phone could ring through my computer.
That's all right.
So where do we come to find you so that we can walk more into the sort of services that you provide to help us embrace this new visibility?
It's easiest just to find me at racheljansen.com.au. There are links to everything. There is a website for Visible Women Media, but it's just easier. Just look up Rachel Jansen and you'll find me there. And I just welcome the conversations.
Yes.
Just to hear what people say. Because I think that there is this huge canvassing of spirit of women over 40 who really do have this self-belief that they just need to find the way to get it out there. And by sharing conversations and tapping into, groups like your circles and stuff where you're around other women who are the same, once you start realising how much wisdom you have to share and you get that sort of feedback from someone else, then it opens up what you see as possible for the next chapter, rather than feeling like you're going to disappear into irrelevancy. It actually opens up doors where you can feel quite energised and vibrant and excited about opening up that space. So, yes.
Oh, I felt that. I actually felt that as you said that. There's this is about flipping the script. This is about shifting our perspective. This is about opening to these new possibilities.
So exciting. So exciting.
Completely. Well, thank you so much, Madonna, for coming and sharing. This is one of those conversations that it actually feels quite emotional, and it feels quite energizing. So there's some scary moments, and there's some moments, and there's I'm standing on the cliff, can I leap sort of moments. But it's energizing, and I love
talking to you, Ange. I always do. We always have fabulous conversations, and I'm so grateful to have that with you. And I'm so grateful that you share all of that with women. It's great.
Thank you, my darling. Well, I'm glad that you came out of the laundry and shared what you learned with us. That is fantastic. Thank you. And to you, my lovely listener or viewer, allow this possibility to land for you as well. The message that Rachel is giving us about this opportunity for our visibility is so darn true. That concept of turning your challenges into lessons and sharing them is so darn true. There is no reason for us to become less visible as we advance. In fact, there is more reason for us to channel that expertise and that experience and to share it with the world. Just in little snippets, the difference that you've made for another person when you've shared a perspective. If you look inside, you will find evidence, ample evidence of that. So just take that as a baby step. Use that as a launch pad. Do start to rewrite this next chapter for yourself, because we need to hear your perspective, and you need to become a part of changing this narrative of what us women are capable of and are able to deliver in our next chapters. I'm really excited to hear what you're going to do. Why don't you drop me a line? Come along to the website, go to the Contact Us page, let me know what you're up to, because I am all about sharing the stories and facilitating the conversations that inspire next chapters. And you, my darling, are an absolute important part of that. So thank you for listening. Until the next episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast, take care. This is Angela Rasmus, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love you to share it, perhaps leave a review in iTunes, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're looking for your own business breakthrough at the moment, then I've got something special for you. Visit angelarasmus.com/breakthrough guide. That e-guide takes you through the 4 key gaps to close that may be stopping you from reaching the next level in your business. I hope it's extremely helpful, and I look forward to talking with you again on the next episode.